Chop, the original Guillotine League podcast. Everything you need to know to avoid the chopping block. Chop is brought to you by GuillotineLeagues.com. Now, your host, Paul Charchian.
Welcome to Chop, the Guillotine League Podcast. It is Thursday. That means it is time to flex around and find out. Kendall Valenzuela always likes to say, I couldn't do this alone, and then introduces her co-host. I think technically I could do it alone, but I don't want to because that's a lot of work. So let's first bring in a man whose love of modeling runs so deep, he's currently got two fingers stuck together with plastic cement from his 69 Dodge Charger build. It's Matthew Freedman.
Hey, Charch, how's it going? I'm looking
There's
at
your
this,
69 Dodge Charger build right there, and you in front of it.
I'm looking at this graphic. That definitely does not look like my car, and I definitely do not look like that. Other than that, though, everything's good. Yeah.
Spot on. Other than the fact that you have no idea what that is, you would never drive that car, and that looks nothing like you. Here's the thing. We're now 7 weeks of the regular season and a few preseason shows in. I'm starting to run a little thin on modeling areas for you, Freedman. So every week they get weirder and more esoteric. Now we're doing model car building.
The model train was good, though. I think however far you can go with that bit, I feel like you should do it.
We're going to keep running that one back. Also, a man who was so distraught to learn of J.J. McCarthy's continuing high ankle sprain and that it hasn't healed. He's taken up holistic healing. He remains in his hot yoga sweatpants after a full session of downward dog. It is Thor Nystrom.
Me, Church. Yeah, this past week I researched whether it would be viable for me to give my right ankle to JJ McCarthy so he would be able to play, but apparently they haven't progressed that far with their medical technology yet. So I'm still here with y'all.
Did you guys ever see that Nick Cage movie Face Off?
Of course, classic.
Yes.
So dumb. So dumb.
Classic of America cinema.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If they can replace faces, then you'd think they could replace ankles and just put your
100%.
ankle in JJ McCarthy, Thor.
Yeah.
I think it's the least we could do. Reminder to everybody listening to this podcast, the Chop Podcast, also available in video format on the Fantasy Life YouTube channel. Guys, I want to start here. We get really focused on Wednesdays around here because waiver wire day is amazing in Guillotine Leagues. I think the best 18 days of the fantasy football season are draft day, number one, and then hopefully 17 Wednesdays after the draft where you're picking up great players. You go get Saquon Barkley, Josh Henry, Josh Allen, CeeDee Lamb. I mentioned Josh Henry, Derrick Henry. Wednesdays are such a big deal. And after that, I think sometimes Guillotine League managers fall asleep at the wheel a little bit. And I want to stress and get your feedback on this. How important it is to continue hunting for players later in the week when breaking news happens. Like 3 weeks ago when we learned Darren Waller was going to come back. 2 weeks ago, when it looked late week, we found out that Rico Dowdle was going to be the starter. Last week, we found out Kamani Vidal, late week, not Hassan Haskins, was going to be the starter. That Bam Knight was going to be the starter. These are late week $0 additions that can turn into starters and get you through a week or two where you don't have to spend money. Free additions later in the week. So let me start with you, Freedman. The importance of paying attention late week and finding guys that are able to help you later on in the week that don't cost you any fab at all.
Yeah, I think that's always the case. And no matter what league you are in, whether it's Guillotine League, whether it's something else, paying attention later in the week always makes sense. And the Kamani Vidal, before you even mentioned that name, that was what I was thinking of, because last week in Guillotine Leagues, I saw him in one of the leagues I'm in available late. So, spot on with that. And then I will also say, even if it's not a $0 bid, the later we get into the season, the higher the caliber will be of some of the players who were dropped to make room for the big name guys who come available. And so we also can end up in a situation where someone might drop a guy who on your team, maybe it's bye weeks, maybe whatever it is, but on your team, if he were on your roster, you might be starting that week. And because it's not Wednesday, because that guy will come up for waivers later in the week, you won't have to be as aggressive in going to get him because people normally won't be paying as much attention after Wednesday. So if that guy had been available on Wednesday, you may have had to pay like, I don't know, $100 to get him. Now that he's available on Thursday or Friday, whatever day, you only have to pay maybe half price to get him. So there are a lot of ways that I think you can leverage the later days in the week to your advantage on waivers.
Yeah, you raise a really good point. There are some really powerful teams in your Guillotine League. Some of them are dropping players that might be a starter on another roster or much more valuable to you as the season goes on. That's a great point. And one of the reasons I love small rosters in Guillotine Leagues, so that powerful teams have to make really hard decisions about who they're going to drop and who they're going to hold. And that provides opportunity for everybody else. Great point. Thor, do you want to weigh in on this late week, just paying attention, reacting late week when a lot of other people have sort of fallen asleep after the great players have been taken on Wednesday?
Yeah, I agree with Freedman that it's important, regardless of fantasy format as far as that goes. But for the way that I play Guillotine Leagues, it's even more of more pressing importance for me to do that. As you guys know, initially in a Guillotine League season, first 6 weeks, even up to 8 weeks, I want to play things more conservative. I want to prioritize floor in the draft, and I don't care if I'm sort of just skating by week after week. I don't want to use my fab. I want to get by with the guys that I have. And then I examples like you're mentioning where you can get free starters, they might be short-term starters. That's fine. I'm only looking to short-term get by. And then I want to have the fab advantage over my opponents once we get into November. Right. And then the better and better rosters start getting cut. I want to have priority at that time. So because of that strategy, it's crucially important because you're already playing closer to the margins. You're taking a risk the other way if you play the way that I play in those leagues. So it's crucially important to get free weeks of value, even if it's just a one-off.
Freedman, will you tell listeners and viewers what we're doing when we flex around and find out on Thursdays?
Yeah. What we do is we take my worldview that everything is just negative and terrible, and we apply that to fantasy football. And we look at the guys who might be on that flex borderline for you, that in normal circumstances, you might think about starting this guy, but we poke holes. We look for the negative and we think about, we make the case for why you should not start that guy, for why he actually might be someone, if you started him, he would contribute to it being your last week in Guillotine Leagues. So we sort of flex around and find out.
Do you think these, we're going to give you 9 players with whom we recommend that you show caution on as you flex around and find out. Freedman, do Rico Dowdle or Chuba Hubbard fall into this category? We're not slated to talk about either one here. Rico Dowdle coming off 473 yards, but we don't know what his role is going to be. Chuba Hubbard, huge question mark here. Do these guys fall into a flex around and find out category for you this week?
That's great. Chuba definitely does. Like, I don't think you can start Chuba at all. I would say that you could start Rico, and we are all old enough on this podcast to where we can remember the glory days of 2016 and Jay Ajayi literally retiring Arian Foster. Arian Foster started the 2016 season as the starter for the Dolphins, and then he got injured, came back, and in his first 2 games back, Jay Ajayi went off for 200 yards in each game. And literally the next day, Arian Foster retired. I'm not saying that Rico Dowdle is going to retire Chuba Hubbard, but Chuba Hubbard does not have a job at this point as like the locked in starter for that team or for any fantasy team of mine. I think it's the Rico Dowdle show until he shows that he no longer has the hot hand. So Dowdle, I think I would be interested. I would be fine enough with starting. I still think he has a decent matchup. The Panthers actually favored, which the Jets, how bad do they have to be at home to be underdogs to the Panthers? But the Panthers still favored. The Jets coming back from that long London road trip. I still think the Panthers have enough of an edge in this spot where even though he's not going to get like the full workload that he had last week, 90% snap share is what Rico Dowdle had last week. He's not going to have it this week, but he's still going to have that opportunity to be the lead back in this matchup with him still having the lead back role. Given what he's done the past 2 weeks, I think it would be hard to bench him.
Yeah. And with Sauce Gardner and still a good Jets pass defense, the first order of business for most opponents is run the ball against the Jets and find out if that's going to work and see if you can just run your way to victory. And so I think there is enough work coming for Rico Dowdle that he does not fall into this category. Chuba Hubbard certainly does fall into that flex around and find out category. But we have 9 official players to give you that are flex around and find out players. And we're going to get to those in just a moment. First, I want to mention that Flex Around and Find Out is brought to you by Xfinity. Imagine all your football all in one place. It's easy. Xfinity. Imagine that. All right, gentlemen, let's roll up our sleeves and let's start with Matthew Freedman. Your first Flex Around and Find Out player is from the game we were just referring to, Jets running back Breece Hall taking on Carolina. You've moved the bar up here. Here we're 7 weeks in. We're not talking about flexing some mid-range players here. Breece Hall has been an every week contributor. Talk to us about the challenge that Breece Hall faces against Carolina.
Yeah, you mentioned it. We're 7 weeks in. And as a general statement, early in the season, you can afford to start studs in bad spots because the cut line is still relatively low. But we're now in the middle of the regular season. And bad teams have been thinned out and everyone else's team has gotten stronger as they've added the studs to hit the waiver wire. And I think that means we now have less flexibility when it comes to forgiving the kind of quote unquote, no doubt starters who continually underperform. Like we have to think a little bit more about some of these start sit decisions. And that's the lens I'm coming at this week when I'm looking at the guys that I'm saying, maybe we bench them. It's not certain, like none of these guys are really like flex plays. These are guys that you would normally start, but I'm just saying like, some caution and applying that to Breece Hall. The Jets offense is bad. Let's start there. Number 28 in points scored, number 28 in offensive EPA. And they've gotten worse as the season has gone on. Number 38 in EPA the past 2 weeks. Now they're coming back from London and having a game right after that, which is tough. And you might think that with Garrett Wilson out of this game, even more of the offense funnels through the backfield and through Breece Hall. And like, you might be right. He might have a larger share of the pie, but the entire offensive pie could be dramatically smaller. And let's kind of think about this. For Breece Hall to do well, he needs to get a lot of touches because he's probably not going to score a touchdown. He has 0 touchdowns, literally 0 touchdowns this year, right? So for Breece to get a lot of touches, the offense needs to sustain drives. And it's hard to do that when Justin Fields is your quarterback and when your number 1 wide receiver is on the sideline. And that's really the only starter level wide receiver on your team, right? And you might think that a lot of the designed pass game will go through Breece Hall, and maybe like he's a good pass catcher. We know that, but he had like literally 0 targets last week. And some of that is just, offensive ineptitude. Some of it is Justin Fields not really being the type of quarterback who checks it down to his running backs. There are a number of things that come into play, but I mean, if he's in an offense that isn't really functioning and isn't throwing him the ball, what does Breece Hall really have going for him? And like, I acknowledge he's a good player. And over his past 3 games, he has 22, 19, and 20 opportunities. Like that is a great workload. It's almost impossible to bench a guy with that kind of workload. And he has 3 games this year with 145, 111, and 155 scrimmage yards. That's great. But in his 3 other games, he has 38, 52, and 59 yards and has been a massive liability in those games because he hasn't counterbalanced that lack of yardage production with any touchdowns. And then there's the matchup. In previous seasons, the Panthers had one of the league's worst, like absolutely like all-time atrocious run defenses. But this season, this offseason, they made it a big point of emphasis. They added more defensive tackles in free agency, and they got back Derek Brown. All right, now they're number 1 in defensive rush success rate, number 3 in defensive rush DVOA. The Cowboys entered last week number 1 in rushing efficiency in offense, and the Panthers D-line held Javonte Williams to 34 scoreless yards. Right at this point in the season, it's possible that in a Guillotine League, you have 2 running backs and 4 wide receivers who this week are obviously less dangerous than Breece Hall, right? And even if you don't, you got to consider your other options because this guy is 50-50. He either explodes for a big game or he explodes your lineup. And this just feels like a clear kind of week where a strong possibility of him exploding your lineup. So I think he's someone I want to stay away from.
Breece Hall against Carolina. You know, if you need a reason to listen to the show, and I hope we give you reasons every week, we called that Justin Fields bomb game last week right here on Flex Around and Find Out. Sure enough, it happened. Let me ask both of you this. I'll start with you, Thor. Percentage chance that Justin Fields finishes the game for the Jets
on Sunday?
Yep.
99.9.
Wow. Okay. That's not what I would say. Okay. Freedman, you're shaking your head. You're like me. What percentage chance Justin Fields finishes the game for the Jets?
82%. I don't know. You know,
I like that better. I'd go even lower. I think this is like the season is swirling away from they're playing Carolina. If Fields is anything close to the player we saw last week, they got to go to Tyrod Taylor. This offense was better in a game and a half with Tyrod Taylor than it has been with Justin Fields. I think that number is closer to 64% chance Justin Fields finishes the game. All right, Thor, let's go to your first Flex Around and Find Out player. It's Tennessee running back Tony Pollard. I like that we're, again, raising the bar. These have been players you've been starting. What's your concern with Tony Pollard?
You know, Pollard, he's averaging over 15 carries a game, generally a must start in a league that would be the size of what a Guillotine League is now, based on the teams that are eliminated. I'm going to keep him on the bench this week, though. I'm a little bit trepidatious here. First of all, he's back into a timeshare with Tajay Spears off of IR. Spears, he plays only 25% of the snaps in his first game back, but last week ends up playing more than Tony Pollard. Tajay Spears played 59% of the snaps at running back in the last game. Tajay Spears had 9 touches for 50 yards, was more productive than Tony Pollard in that game as well. Both of them, of course, play in the worst offense in the entire NFL. And Tony Pollard has been individually bad, even outside of his circumstances with that poor offenses. The defenses can stack the box against the Titans, and Pollard has not shown that he can overcome that. He has less than 4 yards per carry this year. Tony Pollard, he surpassed 70 rushing yards in a game only once this year. And again, you have Tajay Spears back now. Not only that, this is not a good matchup. The Patriots allowed the 5th fewest points per game to opposing running backs in the NFL. I would keep Tony Pollard on the bench this week if you are able to do that.
Spears looked really good last week. He looked like the better runner. Tajay Spears, you know, he had brought the fresh legs. I thought he looked really, really nice. Freedman, what are your thoughts on Tony Pollard? You fundamentally in alignment here?
Yeah, even with Brian Callahan gone as head coach, I still want no part of that Titans offense.
Yeah, particularly in a shared situation. You should know you can get 1 year of Fantasy Life Plus for free. This is the highest level of Fantasy Life's premium offerings. When you download the Comet browser, it costs you nothing. FantasyLife.com/Comet. And this gets you everything on Fantasy Life. You get all the tools, you get the utilization report, Fantasy Hub, and most importantly, you get Freedman's rankings, which are outstanding. This is a $100 value that you get for free. FantasyLife.com/Comet. And when you sign up now, you get a full year all the way back to today's date for free. You get this season, the fantasy playoffs, next year's draft season, all the way into October. If you are already part of the Fantasy Life Plus universe, we love that. Thank you. I hope you tell your friends that they can get it for free as well. Maybe not your league mates. This is a limited time offer. Go to fantasylife.com/comment. Let's go to my first flex around and find out player, and that is Sam Darnold against Houston. I had to save this for some show when Brian Johnson was not here. He'd pop a blood vessel if he heard this slander about Sam Darnold, who has been good, but maybe you've got Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen. They're on bye. You're trying to think of a pivot. You're thinking about Sam Darnold, who's been obviously very good. Depending on your scoring system, Sam Darnold's roughly QB 10, despite basically giving you no rushing. He's third in passing yards. He's fifth in passing touchdowns, multiple touchdowns for the last 5 games. Sam Darnold's been very good, but this is his toughest matchup of the year, maybe of the season. It's Houston on Monday night. Houston has allowed the fewest passing touchdowns, just 3 all year. The Texans allow the fewest passing yards. Fifth fewest passing yards, just 193 yards per game. So if we just look at those averages for Darnold, 193 yards and half a touchdown, I want no part of that. Even if Darnold's going to be the best pass, way better than 103 yards and half a touchdown, maybe it's only 225 yards and 1 touchdown. That's still not enough. And here's the other thing, and maybe I'm just a scorned Vikings fan. Last year, end of season, Vikings had 2 key games that they absolutely had to win. Final game of the regular season, first playoff game. When Darnold was pressured heavily, he collapsed in those 2 big games. This year, he hasn't seen a ton of pressure. Now he gets Houston, an elite pass rush team. Houston ranks number 3 in pass rush win rate. He ranks number 3 by Pro Football Focus, Houston does, in pass rush. And Houston's already had 98 quarterback pressures with a bye week built in. So if Darnold's going to get a ton of pressure, maybe he collapses like he did in Minnesota. I think there's some area for risk here with Sam Darnold. Let's bring back in Thor and Freedman. What are your thoughts on Darnold here? You guys with me on some concern this week against Houston?
Yeah, I think there's reasons to be a little bit trepidatious there, and like you were sort of alluding to, it's always been the same book on Sam Darnold. If you can somehow figure out a way to manufacture pressure, up into his grill, move him off his spot, hurry up his process, that's where the decision making and the accuracy both devolve. So this seems like a good matchup to try to fade him.
Trepidatious Thursday? Should we rename that? I kind of like flex around and find out, but now that we're throwing around trepidatious and we've got the alliteration with Thursday, what do you think? Trepidatious Thursday.
I like that.
Yeah, that works. And I will say the over under on trepidatious times 2 was 30.5 minutes. Thor comes in and smashes the
under. Yeah. Nicely done. Yeah, nicely done.
You're welcome, everyone out there.
Yeah. And I will echo the Sam Darnold skepticism, pessimism, caution, trepidation. Trepidation. There we go. Yeah. I have him at number 19 in my quarterback ranks this week. Obviously, just echoing what Charch said, really tough matchup going against the Texans and Darnold. And you guys, unfortunately, know this as Vikings fans. Darnold seems especially susceptible to pressure, and that is the specialty for the Texans. So, like some quarterbacks might not be challenged by this tough of a matchup, but it seems like Darnold will be especially challenged by the matchup.
Yeah, agreed. All right, Freedman, let's go to your second flex around and find out player. And it is, I don't have in front of me. Who is your second flex around and find out player?
It is AJ Brown. And
AJ, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say, man, AJ Brown is such a good real life player that it just feels dirty to talk about not starting him in any context. But like, this is not the AJ Brown of previous seasons. Previous seasons, he had at least 80 yards receiving per game in each year with the Eagles. Also had 0.65, 0.41, 0.54 touchdowns per game in his previous 3 seasons. This year, 45.7 yards per game. So his yardage production has been cut almost in half, and his touchdown production just 0.17 touchdowns per game. So his touchdown production has been cut down to a third of what it previously was. And I am increasingly skeptical that this gets fixed because the Eagles pass offense is not functioning the way it has been. And I will say again, AJ Brown, so talented, but he's dependent on the guy calling plays. the guy throwing him the ball, and the guys blocking for the guy throwing the ball. And it feels like all of those guys are conspiring to sabotage AJ Brown's fantasy season and by extension, your Guillotine League teams. And the thing is, AJ Brown, he's still getting opportunities. Last year, he had 7.5 targets per game. This year, 7.5 targets per game. But last year, he had elite efficiency, 11.1 yards per target. This year, 6.1 yards per target. Like everything has changed in this offense. The offensive line is aging and it's injured. The quarterback isn't pushing the ball downfield. Jalen Hurts has a career low 6.8 yards per attempt. And the biggest problem, which I'm pretty sure I talked about on the show earlier this year, offensive coordinator Kevin Patullo has never called plays before at any level. And now he's supposed to be the guy charged with fixing a malfunctioning offense that he's not even qualified to have his hands on. And it's not as if he's someone who has been at lots of other places, so he has outside ideas for how to fix this. Patullo has been a Nick Sirianni lieutenant since the 2018 Colts. And by the way, Nick Sirianni lieutenant is one of the most insulting things that anyone could say about an NFL coach, right? Okay. All right. And then there's the matchup going against the Vikings, who are number 1 in defensive pass EPA, number 3 in defensive pass success rate. With all of the injuries to wide receivers, it's hard to bench AJ Brown, but he has just 2 usable games this year. The other 4 games, he has 8, 27, 7, and 43 yards with no touchdowns in any of those games. Like this guy has been a guillotine blade sharpener for most of the season. So like, I acknowledge it will be hard to get away from him just because he's so talented and there are lots of other guys injured, but he carries so much risk in this matchup.
I'll give you the angles to support AJ Brown in this game, and there's not a ton. You mentioned the Vikings pass defense has been very good, and their secondary's been elite, particularly with cornerback Isaiah Rodgers, currently Pro Football Focus is
revenge game
ranked. Yeah, that's true. Good point. Revenge game for Isaiah Rodgers. They should have kept it. Could have and should have kept it. Man, was that what a whiff by them. So AJ Brown against the Vikings cornerbacks. AJ Brown, the Vikings cornerbacks, 2 starting outside cornerbacks are short. They're 5'10". They're slight of build, including Isaiah Rodgers. And the one good receiver game against Minnesota was DK Metcalf. I wonder if the Vikings dare put Jeff Okudah on AJ Brown. Jeff Okudah might be the worst coverage cornerback in the league, but he's big. He's 6 foot, 6'1". He would give you a size matchup with AJ Brown, and then he would just go roast Jeff Okudah. He's currently cornerback 142 by Pro Football Focus. That would be your angle to support AJ Brown this week. But that's about it. All right, Thor, let's go to your second flex around and find out player. I believe that is New England tight end Hunter Henry. Am I correct about that?
Yeah. Well, we're going to go with Hunter Henry here as a fade. I don't like the way that Hunter Henry is trending, though I like the way that the Patriots offense and their passing game is trending. They're sort of going in a little bit opposite directions right now. The first 3 games, Hunter Henry, 13 catches, 165 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns on 22 targets. The last 3 games, those 22 targets have dropped to 9 targets over the last 3 games. Receiving line in those 3 games, 7 for 112 and 1. Hunter Henry has not scored a touchdown the last 2 games. He only had 5 total catches in those last 2 games, scored a combined 12 fantasy points. As you've seen, watching the Patriots game and the ascension of Drake May, as Drake May begins to trust his receiving core a little bit more, and it's no surprise he didn't at the beginning of the season if you saw his receiver play last year, but as he has started to trust Stephon Diggs, as he started to trust year 2 Keyshawn Butte more. Last game, he was even starting to trust Pop Douglas a little bit. You have seen the targets start to go away from Hunter Henry, even though the team at large is having more passing success. I also think this is a sneaky bad matchup. If you're looking to try to get Hunter Henry back on track here against the Titans have allowed only 1 tight end to score more than 9 fantasy points against them. They are keeping tight ends out of the end zone. That's a way that a couple weeks ago that Hunter Henry, 3 weeks ago, that he salvaged a fantasy startable week. It's hard to project him to score a touchdown here. We have already seen the targets start to depreciate. Like I mentioned, I would fade Hunter Henry this week.
You found somebody to take that's going up against the Titans that you don't like.
Yeah.
That is some impressive work. Freedman, what are your thoughts on Hunter Henry, and where do you have him ranked among tight ends? And sorry to throw you the fast action curveball as you dig through your rankings to find Hunter Henry. Just curious to see if you've got some of the same angles in mind as Thor does.
Yeah, I will say a couple things. One, shout out Matt LaMarca, professional producer, who actually on the graphic has Freedman's week 7 rank tied in 13.
13,
So,
right there.
so LaMarca just saved me, but I do have the ranks pulled up. But I totally agree. In terms of the rankers at Fantasy Life, I am the lowest on Hunter Henry for a lot of the reasons that Thor mentioned. The biggest one being that, I'm sure that if the Patriots wanted to, they could get a lot of touchdowns for many players in that offense. But, the target volume for Hunter Henry, as Thor said, has really diminished over the past month or so, maybe 3 weeks. And they just really spread the ball to everyone in that offense. And it's hard to predict week to week who is going to be the guy who really gets the target volume. So that makes Hunter Henry and really all of the pass catchers in that offense pretty volatile and thus dangerous.
You guys know, I remember I like Kayshon Boutte in the preseason. He's been all over the board, but it's the weird thing is he leads the team in snaps, route run. It's just, you can never know with that guy. It is a total dart throw. I think he's dead last in separation among all wide receivers. It's, that guy remains an enigma for me. My second flex around and find out player is Colts wide receiver Michael Pittman going up against the Chargers. Thor, what happens when you start a touchdown-dependent player against a team that doesn't allow touchdowns?
You fade that person.
You flex around and find out. That's what happens right there.
Yeah.
The Chargers have only given up 2 wide receiver touchdowns all year. That is second best in the league. There is our flex around and find out graphic right there. If I had a mouse, I'd be mousing up into the corner to find out how much you're flexing around on Michael Pittman right now. I'll acknowledge this. The 2 scores that the Chargers have given up have come to 2 bigger-bodied physical guys, Cortland Sutton and Deebo Samuel. So maybe there'll be a size matchup advantage for Pittman in this game. But if not, and if he doesn't score, then what? Michael Pittman's average game is 4.5 receptions for 48 yards. If we take a touchdown out of that, now, we're looking at 8.8 PPR points. We're trying to get at least 10 PPR points from everybody. Through the first half of the season, we talked about that a lot as sort of our baseline level is we're trying to get 10 PPR points from everybody. That gets you with 8 roster spots. That gets you to 80 points. You're usually pretty safe even at this stage at 80 points, although it's getting a little wobblier at 80. That threshold, we really starting to move into like 11 points, 12 points, 13 points per player that we're trying to get. And again, if you don't get that touchdown from Pittman, the 8.5 PPR points isn't great. His last 3 games for Michael Pittman, 41 yards, 39 yards, 20 yards, all against inferior secondaries like Arizona, like Las Vegas. Now, Josh Downs may not play in this game. We're going to watch Josh Downs closely. Maybe if he doesn't go, that funnels more targets to Pittman. But overall, I don't like touchdown-dependent players against good defenses, and that's what we're looking at with Michael Pittman.
I'm with you.
All right. Let's move on. Freedman, your final flex around and find out player. Oh, it's another contrarian take. San Francisco tight end George Kittle. You don't like him to knock off the rust against a very good Falcons defense.
Yeah, I just have to say, so this is a general sort of warning. So most of the time when the 21-day practice window opens for a player or PUP or whatever, a lot of the time he doesn't return to game action that first week. So,
Right.
Technically a guy could return to practice and still miss the next 3 games before being activated. And sometimes that happens. So I know there's a lot of enthusiasm for Kittle and there's a good chance he returns this week, but it's not certain. So I'm just sort of raising the flag of fantasy managers need to have a contingency plan in place in case Kittle isn't activated. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is that even if Kittle is activated, he's a 32-year-old with a history of injuries coming probably too soon back from injury. And it's a soft tissue injury on top of that. And the 49ers are desperate to get Kittle back, which means that they're probably rushing him back. He almost certainly won't be 100%. And this is a 49er specific thing. They have a long-standing, but also like very notable recent history of bringing players back before they are ready, and then those guys get injured again. So just this year, Brock Purdy injured in week 1. He was out for weeks 2 and 3. He played in week 4, out for weeks 5 and 6. Juwan Jennings injured in training camp, injured before the season, left week 1 early because of injury, played in week 2, was out in week 3, played in week
Ugh.
4, out in week 5,
Yuck.
was in for week 6, but was hampered, still injured on the field, but doing very little. And then last year, Christian McCaffrey injured to start the year, finally came back for 3 games, out for the rest of the year, probably should have missed the whole season. So if Kittle were fully healthy, he would be a target monster in this situation without Ayuk, without Pearsall, and with a hobbled Jennings. But I'm skeptical that Kittle is going to be his full self. I want to see it for one game. I want to see him on the field this week, see that he's healthy, see that he has his full athleticism, and that they're using him the way that we would expect them to use him in this situation. And if that's the case, great. He's a no doubt must start for the rest of the week. But a situation I absolutely want to avoid is starting George Kittle and then him like pulling up with like a re-aggravation of the injury in the first quarter, and then I'm taking a 0 for the rest of the game at the tight end position. I can get away with that in weeks 1 and 2 when the cut line is low. I can't get away with that in week 7. So I know I have Kittle right now ranked as a tight end 6, and that's kind of like assuming he's active, assuming he doesn't re-injure himself, but like the risk, the floor for Kittle is really low. And then there's the matchup. Falcons number 1 in fewest points allowed to tight ends, number 2 in defensive pass DVOA against tight ends. Strong safety Jesse Bates is a really good cover man. So you put all this together and it makes me, as Thor would say, trepidatious about George Kittle.
And that is our third trepidatious use. Oh, well, I guess we've said it more, I guess, because we were talking about trepidatious Thursday. But I had a tough decision this week. I had been riding Jake Tongas, who'd been all right. He was like top 10 fantasy tight end. And going back to Wednesday, had to make a call on him or trying to get Cade Otton. Cade Otton is sitting in a spot where, without the 3 starting wide receivers for Tampa on Monday night, I think this offense is going to go largely through Cade Otton. So I made that call to switch from Tongas to Cade Otton. But Tongas, he might be out there and he might be the starter. Those are good words of warning. If you call yourself a sports fan, you got to have Xfinity. All the games, all in one place. I'm going to give you 5 reasons. Number 1, Sports Zone. Every pro football game and over 1,000 college games. Highlights, alerts, all in one place. Multi-view. View up to 4 stadiums at one time. The Xfinity Fan View. Live scores, odds, stats, all in one place. Personalized to you. Xfinity's enhanced 4K. It's simply stunning. Beautiful pictures, and voice remote. You just say football, and that's it. Or in Thor's case, you say Thor, Heart, JJ. That's all you have to do on the voice remote with the Xfinity. Imagine all your football in one place. It's easy with Xfinity. Learn more at xfinity.com. Restrictions apply. New residential customers only. Taxes and fees extra and subject to change. All right. Let's bring our guys back. Thor, your final flex around and find out player is Miami tight end Darren Waller. Let's hear about it.
Yeah, in 3 games since his return, Darren Waller averaging 15 PPR fantasy points per game. Pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Scored a touchdown all 3 of those games, 4 of them total. One of the 3 he had 2. That's embedded a very high fantasy floor for Waller. His first 3 games back, scored a minimum 9 PPR points all 3 of those games. And as we've stated earlier in this show, I love to chase floor in Guillotine League. So he's been good to me so far, but this week I have to fade him, even despite the extra targets that he's been getting in the sort of post Tyreek Hill world that the Dolphins are living in. Even tight ends are the one position that you have been able to exploit against the Browns, the team that the Dolphins is facing this week. The Browns are number 19 in the NFL in fantasy points per game allowed to opposing tight ends. But all that being said, I still want to fade Waller this week. I don't love this matchup for him. The Dolphins and the Browns easily has the lowest total on the board for the NFL this week by 3 points or 3.5 points. The lowest total on the board. This game is setting up to be a rock fight. There's not going to be a ton of chances for Darren Waller in this game. He's going to have to extend his streak to 4 straight games with a touchdown in order to be startable. With the way that I play Guillotine Leagues, being close to the margins, there is too much risk for me this week to start Darren Waller. So I will be putting him on my bench.
All right, Thor, you've got you're nervous about Darren Waller, trepidatious, some would say, and Freedman, you've got him at tight end 7. So
Yeah.
you got a little more optimism on Waller.
Yeah, I do. I will say, when I write up my Freedman's Favorites articles early in the week, I do that on Monday and Tuesday. And, now here we are Thursday. Situation has changed a little bit in that, like, now we know it's probably going to be a weather game in Cleveland. And Darren Waller, he's not getting a ton of targets, but he is getting targeted downfield. It's a small sample, just 3 games, but in that sample, he's the number 1 tight end with a 27% share of air yards. But if it's a weather game, they're not as likely to push the ball downfield when targeting Waller, which also means he has less of a chance of breaking a longer touchdown too. And so you put all of that together, even though the matchup with the Browns is advantageous, it is just lesser circumstances for Darren Waller than we would want. So it's hard to know exactly how far I want to drop Waller in the rankings, but he probably won't be my tight end 7 when the games kick off on Sunday.
They're talking about weather, and I always take this with a grain of salt, but they're talking about winds in Cleveland of up to 50 miles an hour.
Yeah.
You can't pass. Once you get to about like 30 miles an hour, it's hard to pass. Anything past that, teams just don't. Quinshon Judkins could be sitting on 30 carries in this game. That is a possibility. Yeah. And as Matt LaMarca, our producer, is telling us, reminder, Tua's noodle arm, not probably going to do well in 50-mile-an-hour winds. There's something to that.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, this is a quick aside. When was the last time, you guys might remember this, because you're kind of like football historians and like holders of random, like, miscellaneous information. When was the last time we had 2 lefty quarterbacks starting in a game going against each other? I think it's been a long time since we saw that. But just putting
great question.
That's a great question.
I don't know.
Years. I would think it's 20 plus years. Unless I'm just. Yeah,
but I mean, Dylan Gabriel is basically like the Spider-Man meme of Tua. Like we have 2 really similar quarterbacks going against each other in this game.
When's the last time we had 2 undersized lefties from Hawaii that one grew up idolizing the other one that played against each other?
I know.
That's fantastic. Our final flex around and find out player is Minnesota tight end TJ Hawkinson against the Eagles. Look, I know tight end's always a hard position to fill, but maybe you've got Mark Andrews and Dalton Kincaid, and you need to find a guy. It's hard to rest somebody like TJ Hawkinson, but we don't know who the Vikings starting quarterback is. Probably not JJ McCarthy. Carson Wentz got a bad shoulder. There is a non-zero chance Max Brosmer is your starting quarterback for the Vikings. I'd be surprised, but you never know if that's going to be the case. That is a possibility. If it's McCarthy, remember, he only threw 20 and 21 passes in his 2 games as they kept the training wheels on. I don't know how Thor feels about that, but I don't love that. And Hawkinson only had 15 and 12 yards in those 2 games. Vikings offensive line still battered. They're going to be missing somewhere between 1 and 3 offensive linemen. And we've seen Hawkinson have to do a lot more chipping at the line of scrimmage to make up for those offensive line losses. And that means those chips means that Hawkinson is slower to get into his routes. That means shorter routes. The last 2 games, TJ Hawkinson's ADOT has been 4 yards and 1 yard. That's it. And here's the Eagles, the opponent. They're the 3rd best fantasy defense against tight ends. They're allowing 14 fewer tight end yards than players get on average and 4 fewer fantasy points than their average. I don't love TJ Hawkinson in this matchup against Minnesota. Guys, your thoughts?
I totally agree with you. And the big thing there, the keeping him back to chip, which became more prevalent with all the offensive line injuries that the Vikings had and what they had seen first game, second game, they made it a pronounced thing of keeping Hawkinson back to chip. And he does a pretty good job with that. Like, he'll displace a defensive end, but you have to help out a guy like Justin School each time to allow your quarterback to have any sort of passing concept. And the delay for TJ Hawkinson getting into his routes, You set that up really well, Charge. That's been the manifestation of it. You don't have TJ Hawkinson used as a seam stretcher this year because he has to stay back and chip. And so it's a lot. He becomes like a tertiary option on any given passing play, sort of the underneath kind of a check down guy. And then, of course, because of the way that those injuries have manifested on the Vikings offense, you're not down in the red zone as much. So you can't use him, generally as the red zone weapon that he is. So I definitely agree with that.
Freedman, you've got TJ Hawkinson way down at tight end 21. You were way ahead of me on this.
Yeah, now I will say that ranking was under the assumption that we see JJ McCarthy at quarterback. I might be wrong on that. Looking at the practice reports, although Carson Wentz is dealing with that shoulder injury, he did practice. I mean, the report says full practice on Wednesday.
I think it's going to be Wentz.
Yeah. And so given that Wentz was a full practice on Wednesday, McCarthy limited practice, I do think it's going to be Wentz. And I know, like, I'm on a show right now with the world's foremost JJ McCarthy truther, but at this point, I think it's fair to say at this early point in his career, he's probably not the pocket passer that he will be later. And so right now, I think Carson Wentz is probably the better option at quarterback for all of the pass catchers in the offense. And so if we change the projections and I do have Carson Wentz as the quarterback, that will move TJ Hawkinson up the board. And I will say it is a situation where I know I'm low on Hawkinson in the ranking, but at least you have the Vikings coming off of their bye. Their offensive line should be healthier at this point. And maybe it's a situation where Hawkinson, as you were saying, Church, he doesn't have to stay in quite as often to chip, and that allows him to go into his routes a little bit more and a little bit further downfield. So we just have to see. But right now I'm leaning towards Carson Wentz, which actually does help Hawkinson a little bit, but still, I'm a little bit low on that offense in general.
Right. So tight end 21 with Wentz moves to like tight end 14. And
yeah, I mean, it's still right.
We're still right in the middle of flex around and find out territory at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. There you go. 9 players, flex around and find out at your own risk. A reminder, you can get a full year of Fantasy Life Plus for free, tier 2. This is the highest level of premium service with the Comet browser. Go to fantasylife.com/Comet. It gets you everything on Fantasy Life. All the tools, the utilization report, the Fantasy Hub, Freedman's rankings, my Guillotine League rankings. It's a $100 value. It is for free, and it gets you a full year to today, next October. You will love it. There's a lot of opportunity to get all kinds of great information. If you wonder where we get all our esoteric stats and information from, most of it comes from our own Fantasy Life site, fantasylife.com/Comet. Freedman, Thor, thank you so much. This has been an absolute blast. We will be back next week to talk and Tuesday to give you some waiver wire advice for week number 8. In the meantime, best of luck, everybody, and we'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.